All right, so tonight's demonstrator is Doug Schneiter. If you guys don't know him, he's been in public education for 27 plus years. He taught in public schools. He's well known for his basket illusions. He's got some of them up here. Unfortunately, my opinion is he's not teaching that tonight because I love watching him do it. It's just amazing. But tonight he's going to give us a great demo. He also teaches at Woodcraft. So for those of you that are considering taking the class tomorrow, realize you're getting a really good deal by taking a class with him here tomorrow. You don't have to pay the Woodcraft prices. Tonight he's going to be teaching us 50 ways to put wood on the lathe. And here is Doug, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about himself.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? My name is Doug Schneiter. Here's my name tag. It is spelled correctly with a T-E-R. That's because my dad's parents both came over from Switzerland. The Germans spell it D-E-R, the Swiss spell it T-E-R. Schneiter in the German language means one who cuts. My grandma's maiden name was Baumann, and in German, Baum is tree and man is man, so a tree man or a woodsman who cuts. So I was pretty well preordained or predestined to do something like this before I was ever born. We're going to get through a whole lot of stuff here today and try and get it all done. I did this demo a couple months ago at the Rocky Mountain Club, and Lee Carter goes, "Oh, I remember when I used to do that demo, but I only had 40 ways to put wood on a lathe." I go, "Yeah, but you didn't have electricity either, so now we got a few more ways to make it happen." So I'm just glad to be here, glad to be invited here. I'm glad this is being recorded and going to be put on YouTube and stuff. I did some basket illusion demos for our club up there a couple years ago that were put on YouTube, and I just looked last night. I hadn't looked in a long time, but my latest basket illusion video had like 282,000 views on it. I kind of figured it. After I did it, I figured there'd be like 15 or 20 guys that didn't make it to the meeting and had to watch it, but that's kind of how it goes. So when I did this demo a couple months ago at our club, it was supposed to be recorded then and put on YouTube too. And at the end of the night, I thanked the videographers for the work they did, and the one guy goes, I'm sorry, I forgot to push record. It's like, okay. You are recording. Okay, double check on that. Okay, I'm using this lathe tonight, this Powermatic. I do have Vic marks at home. I like them. The Powermatic's a good lathe as well. We have one of these for our club too. Thing I like about it, a couple things. Number one, I like the little cooler here. Keeps wood chips out of your beverage as you're turning. One thing about this lathe I noticed today when I got here, I went to turn it on, and what I do at home on my lathes, I always do this, always see if the spindle's locked or unlocked. I turned this on earlier today and it didn't turn and all that. Well, the spindle was locked. Unlocked the spindle. We did a class, this a couple years ago, we had Ashley Harwood doing a workshop at our Woodcraft store up there, and I'd had a class using the lathes a couple days earlier. Well, when taking chucks off, a couple of the guys had locked the spindles to get the chucks off. Well, a couple days later when Ashley's doing a class, a couple of the guys in the class were just mad as heck at me because two of those lathes don't even work. It's like, what's wrong with them? They wouldn't even turn on. And I go, which ones? They go, well, that one. I go, well, here, let's unlock the spindle. Okay, now it turns on. And it's like, if you're ever up on a strange lathe or whatever and it won't work, check that first. Okay. Okay, we're going to start out doing going through this whole list. I do have a bunch of the handouts here if you want them. There's like 30 copies or something, probably not one for everybody, but if you do want those, we can pass those around and have you doing it. What I'm doing tonight too, because I am on camera, I'm thanking all my sponsors and everybody that's helped me out. Right now I've got Glenn Lucas's smock on. Glenn is a great Irish turner. He turns about 3,000 salad bowls a year, only because he cut back from 5,000 so he could start teaching more classes. The guy's phenomenal. But now we talked about Glenn, so we can get rid of this one. It's kind of like being in a NASCAR track and getting rid of my sponsors without taking off my microphone, which I did. There we go. Okay, AEW. I will be demonstrating at AEW in June in Chattanooga. If any of you are going to be there, I'm going to be doing basket illusion. First thing on our list, the multi-spur centers, also called steb centers. They're a good center, especially for a beginning turner, because they're not real aggressive. They don't grab real hard. So if you do get a catch with a tool, chances are the wood is going to spin on the center as opposed to splitting the wood and whatever. This one fits into the number 2 Morse taper. This one fits into a chuck. Either way, okay? Good centers to use, especially for beginning turners. What most people turn with are your typical 4-prong centers. Where do you want me to be? Tool rest, right there. Okay. Good. 4-prong centers, this is what comes with most every lathe. Here's a bigger version. Same thing, just for bigger pieces of wood. Okay, drive these into your chunk of wood. Don't be shy when you're putting them in. Mallet. I like that we have live entertainment next door too. That's nice. Yeah. We see. Don't forget. Don't worry about whacking them in pretty hard. And then also don't worry about if you're getting them to the lathe and they fall out. So long as you have those indentations in there, they're going to go back into place because you're putting pressure on it with the tailstock anyway. Okay. I am going to go through a bunch of stuff pretty quick. If you have any questions at all, don't be afraid to raise your hand or shout out. I know Rick Orr said he was going to be throwing stuff at me if he needed to get my attention. I taught junior or high school kids for 27 years, so I can pretty much put up with anything. So we'll do that. Okay, this next one is a 3-prong center. This was a homemade job, and basically it's just an old faceplate with some holes tapped in it, and these screws are adjustable in case it's going on a piece of wood that's not real straight. You can adjust these screws a little bit so it'll fit and work and all that kind of stuff. Not too much to it, but it's okay. Okay? Okay. The 2-prong center is the next one I'll show you. That's this guy here. A lot of people don't like the 2-prong centers because they think that all they are is a spade bit that's going to dig its way into the wood. What these are designed for is if you're turning a log or something like that, a curved surface, this direction, because then the 2 centers go right in between the grain. If you're using a 4-prong center on here, the 2 going this way keep the other 2 from going into the grain. So that's where this is designed for turning your wood this way. Yes? That's a good question. The question was do I recommend using a wooden mallet versus a metal hammer on driving in your drive centers and stuff? And that's kind of controversial, and it's hard for me to go either way. To be honest, I was taught growing up that you hit steel with steel, you hit wood with wood, you hit plastic with plastic. So if you're hitting something steel, you should use a steel hammer. Now what that does do is it will mushroom out the ends. If you are going to be using a steel hammer on your centers, take them every so often over to a sanding disc or a grinding wheel, whatever, and grind that back. Don't let them mushroom out. Two reasons. Number one, it's dangerous, those chips can fly off. Number two, it'll also prevent it from seating against that number 2 Morse taper, and you won't get a solid connection. So preferably, you know, the mallets work good. You beat them up a lot and all that kind of stuff, but that's what they're designed for. But I have hit them with metal steel hammers before too. Okay. Oh, one last new one that I just recently got is a spike plate. Ooh, we got people oohing and on. We're going to pass this around so long as I get it back. What it does with all those points, I mean, it can really get into a piece, end grain, whatever the case may be. Basically, those are just little track shoe spikes. So we'll pass that around. This is made by Ames Griggs. I got it off of their website. So you do. Yeah, you can pretty much slam the piece of wood against this. You can pound it on with the mallet, but then when you bring the pressure up from the tailstock, it keeps it in place. It does have a center pin. I took it out for now. It has a 3/8 one for a small one. Then I think it's 3/4 or 1 inch for a big one. If you like using that, you can pass those around. You can pass that around and go with that. But it's kind of a. I will admit I am a tool junkie. Yeah, they're sharp. Be careful with them. I am a tool junkie. I do like. When I see something that's shiny and is bright, it's like, ooh, I need that. I know I'm not alone in here. Okay? Okay. Your live centers. Keep in mind, back when I started turning back in the late 60s, 1960s, not 1860s, 1960s, and we didn't have live centers back then. We had what were called dead centers, which were solid pieces of steel that went up against your piece of wood, and you either put a little oil on it or a little wax on it to keep your piece of wood from catching on fire. Well, then eventually some woodturners happened to walk through the metal shop and go, wait a second, those guys have bearings in their centers. Well, they had to. If you were doing it with a solid steel on a metal lathe, you'd weld the 2 pieces of steel together. So woodturners go, well, we can do that. So now that's why now these are called live dead centers, because they have bearings in them. Okay? When you buy a lathe, it generally will come with a cup and point center. Okay? It's got a little, it's got a little cup here with a little point in the center. What that cup does is contains the wood to keep it from splitting. Okay, and it also keeps it from going in too deep. The other option is what's called a cone center, because it's shaped like a cone. Okay, the problem with cone centers is if you're using like a small piece of wood, especially a brittle piece of wood like rosewood or ebony or something like that, if you put this in and keep cranking it into your piece of wood, eventually it's going to split it, because it is a wedge. Okay. So my recommendation is, if you're turning a lot of wood, you probably want to go with a cup and point center more. But if you're turning on a mandrel, I know there's probably a bunch of pen turners in here and stuff like that, then you want a good cone center, because the cone center is at 60 degrees, so is the dimple on the end of the mandrel. This is at 30 degrees. If you use one of these, you end up either wearing down this tip or you end up reaming out your mandrel. If you can, then you get a combination center like this one. This one happens to be, I think this was a jet version, but I know One Way makes one, Robust makes one, whatever. And right now it's a cone center. It's also a cup and point center. It can also be either a reversible cone, like so, to contain a 2x2, or it can be a big cone this way, and then later on we'll show another attachment for it yet too. The problem with these, or the good thing about these, is they're very versatile. I mean, you can use them for a lot of different things and all that. The bad news is they're quite expensive. If you went and bought one, they're over $100. So, but bright, shiny, nice tool. Okay. Let's see. Live centers, cup and points. Yeah. Okay. You can also, actually, we're going to use this. Now we're going to use this other one. You also don't have to use a center to put a piece of wood on the lathe, okay? I did have a guy I work at the Woodcraft in Loveland, and working up there, we do get some interesting phone calls or conversations with people. I had a guy one day, he just couldn't figure out why his lathe wouldn't work. He'd put a piece of wood on it, and as soon as he put a tool against it, or even if he just touched it, it just quit spinning. Okay? Here's why it wouldn't work. He had a live center on both ends of it. Okay? And it's like, okay, do that first. Okay. What we're going to do here is we're not going to use any center at all. We're just going to use a little piece of double stick tape. Whoops. Now, double stick tape does work pretty well, but it has to be compressed. Okay, people will take a piece of double stick tape, stick it on there, put a tool up against it, goes flying out. You got to put some pressure on it for like 20-30 seconds, not too much. This one I don't have very well centered, so I'm going to leave the tailstock up against it for a little bit, and then we'll take it off. My tool rests happen to be, now I took my tool rest off, so how do I know where to put the tools for the camera? Okay, I get my tool rest from Steve Center. He's a good friend of mine out of Iowa. His company's name is Advanced Lathe Tools, Inc., or Advanced Lathe Tools, LLC. I like his tool rest because a lot of times I'll do a very steep shear cut with the gouge, and I can really drop that handle far down. And when I'm using my beating tools, the same thing. I can really drop that tool handle down and all that kind of stuff. I tell my classes of a Woodcraft that I really like these tool rests when they ask me what they should get for a tool rest. I think they're the best ones on the market because they also have a 3/8 rod on top instead of a 1/4 inch like Robust and Laguna. So I told one guy, well, anyway, I was talking to Steve because I was needing a new tool rest right before the Utah Symposium one year, and a couple of years ago, and I said, yeah, I said, I need one. He goes, you're teaching classes in Colorado, aren't you, at Woodcraft? I go, yeah. He goes, that's where that came from. I go, what's that? He goes, well, I had a guy call me the other day, and he said he had just taken a class in Colorado, and the instructor had recommended my tool rests, thought they were the best ones. I go, yeah, it kind of sounds like something I'd do. He goes, well, the guy ended up buying a 4-inch, a 6-inch, a 9-inch, a 12-inch, a 14-inch, a 16-inch, an 18-inch, and a 22-inch. He goes, that 14-inch you want? He goes, that'll be in the mail tomorrow, and there won't be any charge for that one. And I go, okay. Okay, that's pretty round now. I can bring that back. I can do different things with it now. And it's going to hold, okay? I wouldn't put super huge big pieces on with just the double stick tape, but if you're doing inserts for box lids, things like that, it's a very good, whoops, and then you just put it back on. But okay. Okay, let's see. Boop, boom, boom, boom. Jam wood into your spindle. Sometimes. How many of you in here have one-way lathes? Anybody? One? Okay. I did a demo in Southern California a couple years ago, and I called, and you always want to know what they're using for lathes. And One-Way's a great lathe. They're a great company and all that. They're just a little hinky. Their headstock's a number 2 Morse taper. The tailstock's a number 3 Morse taper. They have different threads on them and all that kind of stuff. Now, the secret here is have your pressure going towards the headstock as much as possible. But that's just, let's see if we can do a spin top. Maybe. You guys are having Kurt Theobald in here in a couple months doing demos. Several years ago, Alan Lacer realized that the only state in the union he had not demoed at was in Wyoming. And so he asked Kurt if he could come do a demo up at his shop in Wyoming. So Kurt goes, yeah, go ahead. Well, if you know Alan Lacer is like the master of the skew. He shows up, he puts a little piece of wood like this in the chuck and stuff. He's got an 1.5 inch wide skew, about 1/2 inch thick, and he turns a little spin top like this first with the skew as a warm-up before he does the demo. So I don't use skews, I use bowl gouges, but that's just me. Okay, and then when you're done with this, you can just knock it back out again. Oops. Okay. Mandrels. We'll talk a little bit about mandrels. I don't do a lot of pen turning. I do a little bit. Many of you do way more than I do. There's basically 2 kinds of mandrels. Does that help? Okay. You have your simple long mandrel like this with the jam nut and all that kind of stuff, and then you have the adjustable one like this. If you're doing the 1-part pens or the smaller things and all that, I highly recommend you get one of these. That way you just don't have the flex. They also do come with a little brass stopper thing that you can. Those things are worthless. Okay, throw them away. Like here, I just put in extra bushings to make it work. Those little brass stop things, they just don't work very well. But this and this are your typical pen mandrels. They also make blind mandrels, which fit up into a hole drilled in a piece, primarily for duck and goose calls. And when you tighten them up, they spread out. Those are nice, especially if you're doing it in blind holes and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Cool. Onward. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff really quick and hopefully get all done. And at the end, we got plenty of time for questions and all that. But if you do have questions, again, please ask them up. Okay, Jacob's chucks. These are your standard Jacob's chucks for holding stuff on a lathe. Most people think of the Jacob's chuck as going in the tailstock with a drill bit in it to drill a hole. You can also put them in the headstock and hold pieces of wood or whatever in them. Now, if you are going to do that, I recommend some sort of attachment. On my lathe at home, this is what I use, and it fits in my hand wheel and then screws into the back of my drill chuck. Because when you're using a drill chuck in your headstock, if you're going this way, it stays in pretty good. When you start coming around the corner and stuff, then it wants to start vibrating out. This works on my Vicmark. It's a little too short for this one. This works on our lathes in my classroom at Woodcraft. All it is a piece of ready rod or all thread, a fender washer, and a wing nut. I mean, it's like $1 for the whole thing. And you stick it in, tighten or screw it into the chuck, tighten up your wing nut so it stays all in one place. Highly recommend doing that if you're doing some drill work from the front. This one here is a little bit different. This is what's called a dowel chuck. I don't know if you knew there was a difference. We'll pass the two of them around. This is a typical chuck where the jaws actually have sharp points on them and will dig into your wood and all that. Whereas a dowel chuck, they're actually rounded out so they don't... right here? There we go. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. You want to pass them around or not? Yeah, why not? Yes. What I do when I'm drilling with one in the tailstock, to be honest, I will grab a hold of the chuck body itself to make sure it comes out. I did also have one customer ask me one day, and this kind of drill chuck, but not quite the same. But he called. He just inherited a lathe from somebody, or a neighbor gave him one or whatever, and he wanted to know if he had a couple questions. Number one. Do the 4-blade spade bits that came with the lathe, do they come in other sizes, and how do you sharpen them? Because he tried drilling a hole with the one that was in it, and it didn't work very well. It's like, no, please don't tell me you're trying to drill a hole with a 4-prong center, but he was. It's like, no, that's not what that's for at all. Okay. Also, on that list, if you have the list, there's also, and for some reason it disappeared and I can't find it. A drill chuck is a good way to hold a pin chuck, if you know what a pin chuck is. We had Doc Thode up in our club for many years until he passed away. Doc was a good follower of using a pin chuck. Basically, and I apologize, I can't find it now. It's a 3/8 rod about this long, and you grind off about a 1/2 inch on the one end and put a piece of wire, like welding rod wire, on there. And what it does, it fits in a 3/8 hole, and as the wood turns, I know I had it, but I can't find it. As the wood turns, it locks in place, and you turn your piece, and you just do a little quarter turn, pull it off, put another piece in, and all that kind of stuff. Another option too is like for the this is set up for bottle stoppers. This is a bottle stopper mandrel that threads into a piece of wood and then goes into your Jacobs chuck. What I do on my bottle stopper mandrels, even though I don't turn very many, I have a little plastic spacer in there smaller than the collar of this, because this is usually the size of the bottle stopper thing. And if you make it that, if you make it a little smaller, then you have the option of turning it in or doing whatever, as opposed to just turning right. And you don't hit the steel with your tool near as much either. Okay, screw centers. How many of you use screw centers for any of your turning? Quite a few of you. Oh, that's good to see. I use them all the time. People say, oh, they don't hold. Yeah, they do. I've turned 20-inch platters using only a half-inch of thread, and I've never lost a one yet. This one here is Nova's version of a screw center. This is actually Vicmark's version, and it pains me to say it, but I do like the Nova version better because of the jaws of the chuck can fit right in that groove, and then it can't go in or out, and it's not too long either. If you are using a screw center and all they do is, oops, there we go. Am I still wired? Okay. I was at a demo a while back, and somebody noticed that I have my name engraved on my chucks and stuff, and they go, is theft a big issue with Woodturners? And I go, no, but you just don't want anybody to walk away with it either. I was teaching a class of woodcraft one day, and at the end of the day, I was looking for one of my detail gouges, and I looked in one of my students' bags. I go, yeah, I think maybe you have my detail gouge in your bag there. He goes, no, I don't think so. These are all mine. What makes you think it's yours? And I go, well, it has my name engraved in it. Oh, I don't know how that got in there. I go, okay, not a problem. But it fits right in there like that, works really good. Now, if you are using it and you have a thin piece of wood, whatever, and it's going to be too thick, all you need to do is make yourself some washers out of plywood or plastic or wood, whatever, so that they just fit over here, and now you only have that much screw sticking out and into your wood. Make a couple different. This one's, I don't know, 1/4 inch, I think, maybe 3/8. This one's 3/8. I've got 1/4 inch ones. I've got 1/8 inch ones, and they just fit over, and they work really well. The smallest? Oh, the thinnest? I've done 3/4 inch wood, and then gone in about like 3/8, and then gone like 1/8 or so with my recess. When I'm turning platters, I almost always use a recess as opposed to a tenon, just because then I don't lose any of the thickness of the wood. So yeah, and that'd be like on an 8 or 10 inch maybe diameter piece, something like that. Yeah. Now you can also get dedicated. Oops, should take my chuck off. You can also get dedicated screw centers. This is one that I've gotten from Craft Supplies, and this is the one I use most of the time at home. Nice thing about this one, it has interchangeable collars depending on the size of your piece of wood. If you're just doing something fairly small, if you're doing something a little bit bigger, If you're doing something a little bit bigger, or if you're doing like a 18-inch one, then you got lots of backing, lots of support. I think so, probably. Yeah. The question was, is it more the effect of the bearing surface of the plate versus the holding power of the screw? And I think they work in conjunction with each other. I think, yeah, I think that makes a big difference. Yeah. Yeah, Glazer's thread on. I have one of those too. At my shop at Woodcraft, but I like the ones that slide just because, I don't know, just because they're easier. Yeah, Glazer makes a good one as well. Again, shiny tools. What can I say? Well, okay. Face plates. Oh, okay, screw centers, another one. You know, once in a while you're just turning little small knobs for home, for drawers or whatever. This is just a piece of wood with a hole drilled in it with a screw in it. And there we go. With a little piece of wood screwed onto that piece of that screw, I could turn this whole knob and then unscrew it. Keep in mind it's turning this way, so the wood is going to naturally stay on the screw and all that kind of stuff. But this just fits in a chuck, and you just make your own little tiny knobs and stuff. Set it up so you're using the same screw that you're going to be using when you fasten it and attach it later on anyway. And then you're set. Okay? Cool. Okay. Face plates. Okay, quick and easy. This one, I have to adapt my lathe for this to fit because it's drilled with a 1-inch hole. We were talking earlier about what do you do when you have two lathes with two different sizes of threads on them. This is a 1 1/4 to 1-inch adapter. This is a 1-inch to 1 1/4 adapter. When I'm teaching a Woodcraft, I typically like to use my own chucks. I'm kind of partial to my Vic marks. So I screw this on our little jet middies, and so I can use my chucks. But then sometimes at home I need to do something that's only 1-inch diameter. This is just a block of wood that was then threaded with a 1x8 hole. And now I could glue or tape or screw or whatever, something to that faceplate. Okay? You can also just do homemade ones with a big washer and a nut and weld it together. I'm not going to take credit for welding this because it's pretty crappy weld, but it does work. Inch bolt or inch nuts are much easier to find than 1 1/4. So if you do have a bigger lathe, it's more of a challenge. But inch nuts you can get at your farm and ranch stores and stuff like that, and even at Ace Hardware and all that. And that works pretty good. Here's another one. This is one where Lee Carter and Doc Thode used to have classes. And one of the things they would do was make a faceplate. And with this faceplate, basically what it is, it's kind of a nice little setup really. You take a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and glue a little 1/4 inch piece to it, make a hole, hexagonal hole. You can drill a round hole and then use chisels to make it hexagonal, and then take a second piece and put it over top and epoxy these together. Now you have a little faceplate here. Primarily you're going to use this with double stick tape or something like that so you can keep reusing it and reusing it. But you could also make it thicker out of stronger stuff and just shave off a little bit each time you use it. But that's a little homemade faceplate as well. Okay, and then here we have just a factory steel one. Now this one is actually different than a lot in that they actually did it right. The holes are countersunk on the bottom side, not the top side. You go look at the faceplates I have upstairs, the Easy Woods and stuff, they're all countersunk up here. Well, first of all, most people don't use countersunk screws for faceplates. Definitely do not ever use drywall screws. They will snap. Most people are using screws like this, which are a number 12 or 14 panhead sheet metal screw that are going to sit flush right on here anyway. What is the purpose of the countersink in the bottom? As you, even if you drill a pilot hole, as you screw that screw in, that wood is going to raise up into those countersinks. And if you want it to sit flat while you're using it, you need to have planned ahead. Okay? So, and the countersinking's not that hard to do. You know, if you have your own faceplates and stuff, but do that. But I like using those panhead sheet metal screws. To be honest, I don't use faceplates. I have two big lathes, so I know I have two big faceplates. One has a piece of MDF and a sanding disc on it that I use for a sander, and the other one is actually sitting right here, and I know it must be mine because it has my name on it. I don't use faceplates. I use chucks. But I do have them, and I do, you know, occasionally will use them. Okay. Oh, and then the last thing is something fairly new, and I'm not sure if it's a great idea or not. A faceplate ring. How many of you have used these faceplate rings? Several of you. Supposedly the story is you know, you can turn on this for a while and then take it off the chuck, turn on something else for a while, put it back on, and it's going to register perfect, and you can do it again and all that. And that's good, as long as that works. I haven't used it enough to know, but you can get a bunch of them, and then you can have several projects going all at the same time. So, okay. The comment was the ring will stay where it's supposed to be, but your wood can still warp and move, which does make sense. Yeah. Okay. Not a problem. Repeat the question. Question is, how do you put this on the lathe? You're going to put it over your jaws, expand the jaws out into it. Now that is semi-permanently attached to that chuck. Okay? And because it's round and because it's steel, it doesn't matter if it lines up each time you put it on, because it shouldn't have changed. Yep. No, good questions. Okay. Collets. You can buy store-bought collets. We sell them at Woodcraft. I'm sure they have them upstairs here and all that kind of stuff. The problem with store-bought collets, number one, they're quite expensive. Number two, they have a very small range of motion. I mean, like a 32nd of an inch. Okay, if it's a 3/4 collet, it's only going to go from whatever it is, 23 30 seconds up to 25 30 seconds, whatever. That's all the range you have in those. but they do work if you want precision work and all that kind of stuff. You can get ones that will screw directly onto your spindle. You can get ones that go into your chuck, whatever. I have made, over the years, I have made a variety of, we need this chuck back on again, of homemade ones to do jobs that I want to do. This one is out of wood, and it's just a piece of wood turned with a tenon. The holes are to allow it to flex and spring, whatever. It's a little, tenon's a little big for this chuck, but it'll work. Haven't used this gouge yet. Again, doing box lids, insets, things like that, works pretty good. Okay, that's a wooden one. Sure. Good. I actually, if I were to do this again, the question is, does it matter how deep it is and all that kind of stuff? If I were to do this one again, I would actually have it shorter, just so there is less vibration at the end. You know, if it were an inch shorter, it'd be more stable, more sturdy. And I did cut a little groove around for that hose clamp, just so it doesn't slide in, out, whatever. We got one here. This one is out of PVC. Okay? It's just a coupling or a piece of PVC. I don't know what it is. And again, I cut a groove around it. This one, I have a couple of these. We're just going to put it around the outside of my jaws. If I put a bigger chuck on there, I could clamp on the outside of it. But this guy, oop, that's a little crooked. Okay, guess we'll have to screw that up a little. Oh well. Okay? But again, don't grab a hold of it. Okay? You know, use your hand wheel, let it come to a stop. Basically the same principle, just out of PVC instead of wood. Nice thing about PVC, it comes in lots of different sizes, so you can make them fit kind of the purpose that you need. Do we pass this one around too, or just with the wood one? You okay with that? Okay. Okay. Oh, here's one. Several years ago, I was making golf ball ornaments, and we're gonna show you a little golf ball hollowing. But I was making golf ball ornaments. Well, I wanted the little icicle and the top finial to be like a certain size, and it was hard to get a chuck to hold that size and all that kind of stuff. So I came up with these guys, which are a variety. I used to sell these. You'd get a set. You get like a blank one and an inch one and a 3/4 inch one somewhere. Here we go. And a 1/2 inch one, all in a set for like, I don't know, $5 or $10, something like that. The way these work is, they fit inside the jaws. They're designed for Vicmark jaws. like so. And now, you haven't got to play yet. You know, I can turn these guys at whatever, you know, shape, whatever I like, knowing that they're completely under control. So I also made some of these out of high density polyethylene. They didn't work as well because they were a little slipperier. They didn't grab onto the wood as good as the wood ones do, but they are prettier. But okay. Sure. We'll do a whole bag of them, I think. Yeah, whatever. A little bag and more. Okay. And actually, we'll do the plastic ones over here. You ready? Say what? You could. I didn't. I just turned them and then cut them on a bandsaw. But 3D printing would be a good idea, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm just a simple farm boy from Iowa. Yeah, it might be HDP, high density polyethylene. Okay, now we're getting rid of AAW, and now we're supporting my. Yeah, man, no more stripping. Now I've got my New Mexico wood turning smock on. I did a workshop. I did like 3 days of workshops down there and stuff. Really nice guys down there. Really like down there, and I get down there quite often. Try to. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Fill in spacers. Okay, now we're doing our glue blocks. Okay. You can take a piece of wood and screw it to your faceplate. Okay, and you can turn that whole piece of wood, take those screws out. And unfortunately, you end up with a turning that when wood turners see it in a store and turn it over like such, they either see four dabs of wood putty or 4 little felt dots or 4 little cork dots, or for somebody that's a little less challenging, just one big whole piece of felt on the bottom. We've all done that. But there are ways around that, okay? You know, I have a bowl in my basement that I turned when I was probably a freshman in high school back in like 68 or 9, something like that. The outside of it is, or the inside is actually not too bad. It's kind of curved and stuff, but the outside just kind of goes boom, boom, with a flat bottom. And I still have that, and I do walk by it every so often. And when I see it, I go, God, it's a good thing you got better, because that piece really sucks. But we all started somewhere, and all we can hope for is that we keep getting a little bit better. Okay, this piece, when you're gluing onto a scrap block, you can use several techniques. You can use regular wood glue, like Type Bond, which I typically do. You can use epoxy. You can use CA glue. I'm a little iffy on CA glue for bigger piece of wood because of the fracture functionality of it and stuff. Some people like using hot melt glue. I've never been quick enough to put hot melt glue here and get a piece of wood on before the hot melt glue turns, hard already. But when we do the when we go and do the golf ball, we'll use some hot melt glue on that. This one is glued on. This one is actually glued on using the brown paper bag method. How many use the brown paper bag method? Quite a few of you. You guys are really experienced here. I'm not quite sure why I'm demonstrating to you. Okay, just, oops. We'll talk about you later. Wait your turn. Be patient. What's that? Cool. We are going to talk about that. We're going to show you some examples of it in the next couple of minutes. Yeah. When we're doing art shows, when I'm doing art shows and stuff with my basket illusion pieces, people will look at those and they'll just go, "Oh my God, you must be the most patient man in the world." My wife will be standing behind me and she'll just start laughing. She goes, "No, he's not the most patient man in the world. You have not seen him around heavy traffic or small children." But hey, I try. Okay, I'm just going to true this up again a little. Now that I have it true, if I wanted to get rid of the tailstock, I could. I could do, we're not going to do a whole lot of turning tonight because I don't know who's cleaning up the floor. And I don't want them to get mad at me. But, okay. Now, once we get done turning this whole bowl and all that kind of stuff, we'll assume that it's shaped better than it is now and all that kind of stuff. To answer the gentleman's question there in the back is, okay, here it is, chisel and mallet. If I put this mallet or this chisel right on that glue line and a couple of whacks, that brown paper bag splits in half. What's that? Newspaper does. I don't like newspaper because the water in the glue makes the ink sometimes soak into the wood. So I go with brown paper bags, and then you sand this off. Okay? This is the one I did. You can also do it, and we're going to. You can also do it with spindle turnings. Okay? Huh. So, with a spindle turning, you end up with a pair of somethings, okay? They're a matched pair. Yeah. And then, here's the one I did for our club a couple months ago. Because I was at a flea market or an antique shop, and I saw this set of bookends that looked like an acorn, and it's like, I thought that was really cool, so I glued up some white oak, because that's where acorns come from, and textured it and all that, and turned it, and then split it, and when I got it done and took it home, I told my wife, I said, I think that'll look really good as bookends. She goes, either that or look really good in the wood stove. She wasn't as impressed with it as I am. So these two things are staying with your club here. And you can raffle them off or put them in your wood stove. I just can't put them in mine. But you can also do it in fourths. You can and have quarter rounds for like on the inside of, you know, furniture or whatever and all that, just kind of depending on how much risk and how much you trust your gluing. Question? Yeah. Okay. He said if you're doing a longer spindle, hide glue works a little better, a little stronger. And if you're doing bigger things, I did some bigger things. I put hose clamps on the end, on both ends, just to make sure that it's not going to fly apart on me. Oh, okay. Okay, good point. Yeah. Now, one thing about these two is you don't have to necessarily turn the whole piece or like that. I don't know if any of you saw this one. This one's actually an oval. Okay? This is Art Leisman's lost wood process. And what we do when turning these is we take this piece and we put a scrap piece of wood in between it, like so. We turn our hollowing, we're hollowing it out through a hole here in the center, and then you can texture it or whatever it is you want to do to it. And then split it on both lines, take out that scrap piece of wood, and then put the two halves together, and you get an oval or something like that. So that's just another kind of path you can go down with that technique. Yeah, yeah. Question? Yes. Piece of wood, glue, brown paper bag, glue, second piece of wood, clamp overnight. Like I said, I typically use tight bond. Yep. Yep, you're welcome. Yeah. Yeah. I get mine once in a while. I'll go get something either at Sprouts or at Trader Joe's, Trader Jack's, whatever it is, and they have brown paper bags too yet. Really? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, did that answer some of those questions regarding the brown paper bag method? I gotta plug my glue gun in. Okay. Yeah, it's a fun technique, and you can get some kind of amazing results out of it. And it's you go, wow, I didn't know that'd work, but it does. Okay. Double stick tape. We talked about double stick taping. If it's on a little larger surface, like this and this, I would not necessarily cover this whole thing with double stick tape. It's going to be a bear to get it off. Typically I cut little 1-inch squares, and I'd probably put like 4 of them on here. Turn it and then get rid of them. Now, if you're going to turn it into a bowl, you don't want to put your double stick tape clear on the outside and start shaping it. Then you're going to end up losing it. So plan ahead a little and see what works. Okay? I've done that before, so long as the faceplate is clean and true, flat. Yep. Now I did read an article one time about a guy who was doing the brown paper bag method, but instead of using brown paper bags, he was using painter's tape, blue tape, and he'd put like blue tape on one piece of wood, then a layer of glue, and then the other piece of wood. I would not trust that because, first of all, blue tape isn't supposed to stick very well. I mean, if I was doing it, I'd use like the green, the frog tape that's supposed to stick better, but I still would rather have glue paper glue than that. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's amazing what we can do with some of the materials that we have. Okay. By the way, so far I've only used like a couple of my chucks. We're going to talk about chucks in just a little bit. I am a bit of a chuck junkie, just a bit. I have Vicmark chucks because I have Vicmark lathes, and I think Vicmark chucks are the best that are made. There's some others that are very good, but I like Vicmarks the best. Some of the chuck companies, like for example, Nova, has a whole chapter on their owner's manual on how to clean your chuck and make it last. Vicmark doesn't have that chapter because their chucks are all sealed. Nothing gets in them anyway. I've had some of my chucks for 25 or 30 years, and they've never gone bad. I do have this size chuck, the VL100. Like I said, I am a bit of a chuck junkie. I have 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. And then on the bigger chucks, this is my newest one, my latest one. I have those with 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, and 6 inch. I don't like changing jaws. I'll grab a different chuck and use it. I had a guy come into the store, into Woodcraft, and he wondered if we had the replacement screws for putting the jaws on his chuck. I go, yeah, we do. He goes, how many do you have? And I said, well, I got a couple bags or a couple boxes worth here. I'll get you one. He goes, no, give me both. I go, what do you need both of those for? He goes, well, I strip those screws out quite often. I go, how do you strip those screws out? He goes, well, when you put them on with an impact wrench, they just come apart. And it's like, why are you using an impact wrench to put your chuck jaws on? Well, they're supposed to be really tight. Not that tight. I go, that's why they give you an Allen wrench with a handle on it about that big. But he was using an impact wrench and wondering why he was stripping the hole out in the center of his jaws. Like I said, and I hope that wasn't any of you, but yeah, okay. Oops, still hot. We're gonna let that set a little, and then we're gonna just do a little bit of play hollowing as we go on. Scroll chucks. While we're letting that set up, we're going to talk about scroll chucks. They can either expand into a recess, or they can contract over on a tenon. Now, when I'm doing hollow forms, I virtually always use a tenon and contract onto it because it is a little stronger. When I'm doing my platters and bowls and stuff, I generally use the expansion mode, so I'm still retaining the full thickness of my wood. Okay. The key is when using a chuck is the jaws on these chucks are tapered, so must your recess or tenon be. Okay. Like if okay, that one doesn't work. Okay, this corner here has to be very clean. It can't be rounded over. It has to be sharp, and this has to be less than 90 degrees. Typically, I didn't know exactly what the measurement was until one day when Glenn Lucas told me. He goes, that's 77 degrees on a Vicmark chuck. I go, okay, I believe him. I haven't measured, but it's but he says 77, so I believe him. Make sure that it's clean. Also, make sure that your tenon is not deeper than the depth of your jaws. Okay, you want this area here to be resting on top of here. That's what keeps the piece from torquing out. If you just have a round piece sitting in here and you're working on this end of it, that piece is going to start wobbling or it's going to come flying out. Okay, it has to sit on top of these jaws. That's what keeps it good. Now, if you're doing a recess on the bottom of a platter, you also don't want a little thin. I'm a terrible artist, by the way. I can color inside the lines. So you don't want this to be too thin, because as you expand those jaws out, if that's only a 1/4 inch or so, that's going to snap off, especially where it's going with the grain. So what I do when I'm doing a recess is I will mark a line on there with a pencil, like giving myself like 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. You can always turn that off later anyway. Okay. The other problem that people make with chucks is they let the size of their jaws determine the base of their turning. Okay. Now, if you're turning 6, and most people have a chuck with 2-inch jaws that'll go up to maybe about 2.5. Well, that looks okay on a 6-inch or 7-inch bowl or something like that. But if you put it on a 10-inch bowl, something like that, that little base just doesn't look right. So don't let the jaws determine the size of your base. Okay? You can either do 2 bases, one where you're clamping onto and then have a secondary base, and you're gonna get rid of the first one in the first place, or something like that. Okay? Or you just get more chucks with more jaws. That's my answer. Okay. We did talk about using a Jacobs chuck to drill holes. Stay. But also keep in mind, oh, by the way, too, this is not a trick question, but it sometimes turns into one. Let me put this in here. Once in a while, you'll be using a strange lathe or whatever, and you'll have a tailstock in there or a live center in there that is short stemmed. And you sit there and you try and turn it back, and it won't come out. We had a meeting at our club, oh, this was several years ago, and they couldn't get this out. And they were going after hammers and pry bars and all that kind of stuff. And all I did was I grabbed my parting tool. Here. Whoa. How'd you do that? It's like, just put some pressure against it so it can pop out. Okay? Well, that's the worst thing, because what happens is in a lot of these, I did bring one right here. In these cheaper, or in these less expensive ones, like this, they're hollow. Well, the problem is you use a knockout bar on them. This tip is also removable. Okay? Through 21, my last teaching gig was 21 years at Loveland High School. And so the kids would use the knockout bar, and this would go flying. This tip will always go either underneath the biggest piece of machinery you have, or it'll go in the deepest pile of wood shavings you have, so it can get swept up and thrown away. I used to keep about 6 of these tips in my office desk drawer, just because I knew I'd be replacing them all the time. Okay? So, yeah. Yes? Sure. Okay, I think so. If I understand the question is, can I talk about proper sizing of tenons and recesses? When you're using your chuck on a tenon or a recess, generally the jaws don't necessarily have to be completely closed, because then you have no give in case you go to rechuck it and stuff. And also keep in mind that when the chuck was made, it was made, then it was cut. So the 1/8 inch or whatever of that cutoff wheel is what would make this a pure circle, true circle. Now, to be honest, when I'm using these, I generally go 1/4 inch apart on them, because for calipers, I use, most of the time, I either use the figure 8 calipers, what's the French one that Craft Supply sells? I can't remember. It's a figure 8 one. Or I use Mike Jakovsky's calipers, and the arm of the calipers will fit between the jaws, so I can check the very bottom, the very center of my piece. Now, what you don't want to do is get them far out, okay? First of all, if you have the jaws go out, and this one here, it has to go out beyond the body, but you typically don't want them go on beyond the body, because when these are spinning and hit you, they hurt. Yeah, everybody in here probably has a knuckle or two that have been smacked by these and stuff. So have your jaws reasonably close together. I typically do about 1/4 inch. And same thing with a recess. You want it to be fairly close to a circle, so you're getting even pressure on that whole recess wall instead of just pressing on 4 spots. Yeah, good question. Okay, we took question. Yeah. Oh, I agree. That's what irritates me when you buy twice turned bowl blanks or get them from somebody. They turned them at the bare minimum of the chuck they had, and then you get them and you go true up that 10, and now you have nothing to hang on to them with. Yeah, I agree. We talked about using a Jacob's chuck. We can also drill just with a number 2 Morse taper drill bit. Okay? Craft Supplies, I know, sells these in several sizes. You can also get them. I happen to get a few when we shut down our metal shop at school I taught at. These are a little bigger. I'm hoping it's pink. When you're doing golf balls, you hope that the inner core is a different color than the outer shell, because then you can see as you're hollowing when you get to the outer shell. The golf ball I used when I did it for our club, the inner core was just as white as the shell, and so it didn't work too well. But we're not going to do a lot here because we still have some more to do. But we're going to do just a little. 15 minutes? Wow, okay. This is one of Laurent Leclos' hollowing tools. But you get the idea. Okay? And what we would do, and what I may do tomorrow in class, is finish hollowing that out. Hard rubber. Yeah. Here we'll, oops. Yeah. Sometimes they're green. Yeah. We'll pass that around. You can just take a look at it. But, see, I just almost did a hollow form in like 4 seconds. So for those of you that are thinking about taking that class tomorrow, just imagine how many things you're going to be able to turn in a whole day. Yeah. It just peels off. Okay. Oh. Jumbo jaws. Some people Ooh. Okay, it should fit. I have 2 sets of jumbo jaws that are on dedicated chucks. One is a small one that goes 12 inches. This one's a little bigger. This will do about, it'll do about 20, 19 or 20. When you're using something like this, slow your speed down, okay? It does have, there we go. But you can see that's running nice and true, okay? No problem with it all. That was like at 430 or something. There is somewhere on here, oh, here we go, maximum RPM 600 RPM. But I did find that if you get it going fast enough, you really can't read that anyway. No, always follow the rules, okay? But don't go overboard, okay? The old Dale Nish rule on speed is still a good rule to go by. But when you are getting, how many of you have some sort of cold jaws or jumbo jaws now? If you have the Nova ones with the little light gray buttons, get rid of them. They are terrible, okay? They're just soft rubber. The tighter you tighten the screw, they actually bulge out, which makes them even less effective. You can get replacement ones that are either square like this from Vicmark, or you can get round tapered ones that actually Nova does make. They're just hard to find. Also, One Way makes replacement ones that are also tapered round ones that work really well. The ones that come standard with the cold jaws are just dangerous. They do not hold the piece of wood very well. Oh, yeah. Especially if your bowl is has a very acute angle, they're kind of okay, but if your bowls are pretty straight-sided, they're not going to hold. They just won't. Longworth chuck, I don't have one. I've always used these guys. A friend of mine told me about a Longworth chuck that he has. They're the ones that have the spiral cuts in them that as you turn them, he had one blow up on him. And so he goes, okay, that's enough for me. I don't need to get one of those either. But that's the only one I've heard blowing up. So if some of you have better experience with them, so be it. Okay. Yeah, I got to get to work, don't I? Okay. Ow. Okay. Jam chucks. If you are doing twice turn bowls, rough turn bowls, actually I have put just the bowl blank right on the outside of my chuck and it works just fine. You can make a wooden block like so. Bring your tailstock up against it and use that as well. Oops. Just to turn a new tenon. All you're doing right now is turning a new tenon, okay? And that is going to hold it more than adequate to do that. And like I said, you can just throw it up against your chuck as far as that goes. When finishing off, hollow forms, there's a couple ways to go about it. And let's see, I might have to borrow one of my hollow forms. We'll use this one. We won't hurt it too much. if I'm turning off the bottom on this hollow form, I'll do it one of two ways, okay? If it is a pure round opening like this, nice and I'll use one of my cones, and these will go in my chuck. Like so. Hollow form goes on here, tailstock up against the tenon, whatever, and turn it off, okay? If the hole is round. If the hole's not round, if it's irregular or whatever, cones don't work very well because they don't have a good seat to them. So instead what I'll use is something like this or this. Again, it's just PVC. I've rounded the edges over. This one goes, actually I think this one will go in between the jaws like so. And what I'll typically do is get a piece of that foam stuff and put it in there and clamp it in that way. Now another method, a little more complicated, but works equally well. This guy here, and what this one does is goes inside and the rubber pad fits on the bottom. You loosen up this screw here, bring this cone up to the faceplate. Actually, this goes in the headstock. And bring the cone up to center this, have your tailstock up here, and that rubber pad provides the friction to do that. These were, I've had this one for like 25 years. We were talking about it earlier as to who makes them and all that, and to be honest, I can't even remember anymore. Jam chucks. This is a jam chuck here. This one's designed to go on a screw center. This one is designed for exterior on the outside. If it's a flared out bowl, if it's a more closed rounded bowl, then you want to have it an inside jam like so to turn off your bottom and all that. Okay. Donut chucks, not very often used unless in production, because with this would screw on my lathe like so. These tighten up. They're a little unwieldy, and they're kind of limited to, you know, you have to have different discs with different circles and all that, but if you're doing 10 of these urns and they're all going to be the same size, then it's not a bad technique to use, okay? Then, oh, yeah. Right. All the others, you are using the tailstock to hold the pressure against it. Very good question. And on this one too. And on this one too, make sure you have the extra bolts on the headstock end because you're working this end. Okay? Yes. Safety first. Boat anchor. This is my version of a, skateboard wheels, of a center steady. It's gotten smaller. When I did this demo for our club, I used to have 3/4 inch plywood on both sides of the steel. It was a boat anchor. This one was designed for my 16-inch lathe, my VL200. To make it work on my 24-inch, I have four 2x2 steel tubes that I put underneath that to raise it up to the center. If I were to do it again, there's a lot of really good ones on the market right now, either from Carter Products or from Steve Sinner, that are a tenth the weight and do just as good of a job. Let's see. Oh, you can make, one nice thing about these live centers, these combination centers, is you can make little jam chucks that will screw right onto that thread, because that thread is a standard 3/4 by 8 TPI nut, and you just put that on here, and yeah, something, whatever it is, and it works. Okay, and now you can do spheres if you cup them out, and different things like that, and do sphere chucks. Let's see. Oh, this is a one-way bowl steady. It actually fits about here. So if you're turning a big bowl or platter, you adjust this so it's riding on the back rim. So when you're doing, because typically you do the back side of a bowl or platter first, and then when you're doing the inside, you can have this running up against it to keep it from flexing, keep it from waving, keep it from doing all that good stuff. Okay. Vacuum chucks. Didn't talk about vacuum chucks. There's basically two kinds. How many of you in here have vacuum chucks? Several of you. You can either use the Venturi system, which works off an air hose that going through the Venturi valve creates suction, or you can use an actual vacuum pump to suck it on. I personally haven't used vacuum chucks much. I have one, but I haven't used it yet because, number one, vacuum chucks don't work on pieces that have holes on them, and they don't work really good on pieces that have all kinds of rims and beads on them yet either. So I haven't used my vacuum chuck yet, but I do plan on it in the future. How are we doing on time? Done? Okay. My last little spiel here. Hopefully you enjoyed this demo and picked up an idea or two that you can use in your shop. Tomorrow's that hollow form turning. Hopefully a couple more of you can make it to that. It'd be great. I have tools. I have wood for you to use if you don't have them, and we're going to have some fun. And again, I want to thank you for having me here at your club tonight. Actually, it's partly my club too, because part of the fee for demonstrating tonight is I wanted to have membership in this club as well. So, so now I feel a part of you guys. Thank you guys all.